Hey there, Russ here. Welcome back to the shop. I'm going to talk to you about AFUs, mobile versus stationary. Now, the question is that if you're going to have an AFU, air filtration unit, do you want a stationary unit or do you want a mobile unit? And my answer to that is yes. In other words, if you have only a stationary unit, you're still missing. It's not going to do the job for you the way you think it is. It eventually cleans the dust out of the air, but the further away from your dust creation area you are with that AFU, the longer it'll take for that air dust to get to that air filter, quite frankly. So that's, as you move around the room, you're going to have areas that will have that dust floating around still because it hasn't flown up in there. You have air currents in your shop. So when that dust is created, it will kind of linger in the whole shop pretty well. And depending on which fans you have going in your shop and that sort of thing, you'll have different shifting air currents going on in that shop. So that air is just getting moved all over. So if you have that big unit in one place, eventually it might get there, but it takes a long time. So my thought is that I like to have one big central AFU, which I have. That's the one that's in my workstation right above my legacy ornamental mill in my shop. That's my biggest dust collector. And when I made I did that. You could go back and look at my workstation, in my legacy playlist. You can find where I built that workstation, and I talk about that fan as I built it and put it in place. But basically, I used a high volume fan, a high velocity industrial fan. It cost me like $100 for it. And you turn that on high, it's like a wind tunnel in front of it. So that is overkill for a unit, you would think, but I have found that it actually works real well on low speed for normal circulation in the room to eventually get the dust picked up. So I use that as my primary unit. It comes on in the morning when I open up the shop. My other units, and I've talked about them a little bit, I have now 6 AFUs in my shop, and every single one of them is a different fan. This one, like I talked about this one before, and I just used a simple twin fan, window fan. I also have done it with a 20 by 20 box fan, and I've built one using a Stanley, what kind is that? That's a one with the squirrel cage. And it's yellow and black. I think they stopped making it, but it's the Stanley. Anyway, and they still make some like that. That one, I made a 20 by 20 box, and you shove it into the box. The nose with the outlet on the fan goes into the outlet on the box, and then the air gets blown into the box and filtered on the opposite side. So it's a simple setup. It's small enough. I have a handle on it. I can pick it up and move it around. So I try to put something like that. If I'm going to be creating dust anywhere in particular, like at my oscillating spindle sander or things like that, I like to get dust, an AFU, set close as I can to where I'm doing that work, and let them run constantly and run afterwards for a while. Rather than having to turn on and off, you just want to turn it on then at that point and let it help clear the air for extra time. That way it'll pick up most of the sawdust in the air quicker and more of it than if you waited till that air, all that dust floated over to your big unit, which may be across the room, quite frankly, depending on where it is. So you don't have to have your main unit centrally located. It's okay that it is, but it's not really centrally located when you think about it, because the air is coming in on one end of it and blowing out the other end. So it's not drawing evenly from all over anywhere. So wherever you put it, it isn't critical in my opinion. As long as it's doing the job of scrubbing the air the whole time you're in there, eventually any fine dust that's still floating around will make its way there enough that it'll get sucked out of the air. So it's good to have one, but you really truly need to have something close to where your work is too. Every time I sand on my workbench, if I'm going to be sanding a lot, I grabbed one of my AFUs, my mobile ones, and I set it on top of my workbench as close as I can get to where I'm doing the sanding. But even if it's at the other end of the workbench, at least it's close enough. It makes a big difference then when you sand as to how much dust gets into the air. And I can tell you that I can attest to that, because it used to be, I used to get dust falling on all my stuff all the time. It always had layers of dust on them. And I learned after doing it this way, I virtually never have a film of sawdust on my tops of all my tools like I used to. So I know that it's scrubbing the air better. Is it perfect? No, I don't know if there is a perfect system. But I don't like to wear masks. They're very uncomfortable for me to wear a mask. So I have to catch that dust as quick as I can in the air so that I don't have to wear a mask if I'm going to work here. Because with COPD, it just makes it harder to breathe when you're breathing through a mask. So one of these days, maybe I'll make a mask that will work for people like me, because I know where the problem is. And I think that they could develop a mask that would do that very easily if they wanted to. But that's another story. It's another idea in my head that may never get known. But right now, the main thing to remember is that you are going to have to keep your some of your AFUs, make them smaller and make them more mobile. The smallest one I got is my little hybrid Ryobi fan, and I know what that is. That little runs off of the batteries, or you can plug it in. It's a great little fan, about 10 inches in diameter or something like that. And I built a little box filter for it, and it sets down on it, and all the air is drawn in, and that fits nicely, real close to where you're working without getting in your way. And you know that thing is really sucking all the air pretty closely in this area directly into it. That's actually, I'm very happy with that unit as a small unit. But anything is still better than not having the unit close to where you're doing it. So, and sometimes you're creating a lot more dust, so maybe a slightly bigger unit might be better than that little fella right there at times. Anyway, it's up to you. You have to figure it out. You can, but it's not critical. You really need a mobile AFU. So let's do this. I'm going to take this one apart real quick, because we talked about this one a little bit. In fact, I have a video where I showed you how this thing worked and talked about it when I first made it about 5 years ago. I'll leave a link to it in the description. I'll also leave a link to where I described my Stanley filter system. It was on another subject, but I took about 5 minutes and showed you how that fan was put together and how it worked, so you can get an idea of that one. And I also did a video on my box fan, and I'll leave a link to that one. So the legacy one, you'll have to go to that playlist and go into the playlist and find where I did the fan, because I think there's like 2 episodes in there. But looking at that workstation is not a bad thing anyway. It would not be a waste of your time, because the workstation overhead above your work area, even with a lot of those ideas, would be very handy. So if you like to be able to build an overhead workstation above your workbench, that's not a bad way to do it. So anyway, let's take this apart while we're talking about this. And like I said, the air currents. And this is just put together. It's a 3-sided frame of plywood to make a 3-sided box. The 4th side is 1/4 inch. That's the way I could take it on and off easy, with 3 screws holding it in place. This was the bottom when it's hanging from the ceiling. So down on this side over here, this piece, I could take it down and slide it. I had it to where I could take 2 screws out and I could twist it and leave it in place, and then the air would bypass the filter and just blow air. So if I want to use it as a fan, I could still do that too. I like to be able to do that on these things. Make them ambidextrous when I can. But it's turned out to be a fairly good design. I could have put hinges on it somewhere and all sorts of different things, but this is a pretty simple setup, and it's not too hard to have to take it apart. And I've already had to take it apart. This is the 2nd time. When I first made this, the motor was squeaking, and so I had to lube them up. And I used WD-40. It lasted about 2.5 years. I had to take it apart. I did it again. This time they're squeaking. This time I'm going to do it with 3M, and I'm going to make sure that both bearings get lots of juice, so that this time maybe it'll go for a long period of time. But taking it apart is pretty easy because both the front and the back are just like picture frames. After I built this box frame, then I just made 2 picture frames. One fits a fan, the other one fits the double filter, and then they just bolt to the box with pocket hole screws on each end of it. And that's simply how it's held together. It works pretty good, and it is pretty easy to take apart. So, and I think that's the last one. What's holding that? Oh, I missed one. See how well I'm paying attention. So, normally it only takes a couple minutes to take it apart. Uh-oh. I think I missed one over there too. Yep. Okay. So now, then when I take it apart, I do have 2 pins here to help line it back up when I put it back on. So, but it just comes apart. And now I can take the fan, take it out very easily, and take it apart. Clean it up and lube it up. Looks like I need to put a new filter in there finally. But basically it's held in the same way. I take the pocket hole screws out, and this just sets into a frame right here. So I have to take that off, and then I can just lift the filters out, put the new ones in, and put the face plate back on it, the back plate. So I do have to build a new filter, because I just took a 20 by 20, and since this is 20 inches wide, I had to cut it down because it's only like 14 or 16 inches here. So I had to cut the filter to get it to fit. So I had to vamp the filter. I didn't like doing that. I like to leave them 20-20, but to make this with a 20-20 filter was kind of difficult. It could be done. I'm not saying it couldn't, but this was easier to just cut the filter down and make it fit the box rather than making the box fit the filter. So, and this is only the second time I've had to change out that filter. And as you can see, this outer filter is a pre-filter. It has helped to make the longevity of that inner filter be what it is. Because I would just go over here and vacuum this off every now and then periodically. And this caught all the big stuff. And that helped keep that filter from getting so clogged up so quick. Anyway, this thing is now ready. I'll put this to the side. And I'll finish taking this apart later, the fan, and I'll get it lubed up. And then we can put this back in operation. I took it down from the ceiling. Oh, I also, for the top part where it hung, was just a U-shaped bracket. These bolts were what went in from the inside. They just sit in there. And I didn't even glue them in or anything. So that's why they fell out when I took it off the ceiling. But when I'm ready, I can put these back in place and then hang it from the ceiling again. So that it hangs on the ceiling most of the time. But you could easily make a sling of some kind so you could lift it off of there and use it as a mobile if you wanted to, and then put it back. I kind of did that with my box fan. But anyway, that's how that works. Just remember that when you're doing air filtration in your, whether you use one of these or one of the other style fans, you can make it out of any kind of fan. You could do it out of a circular fan if you wanted to, a little oscillating. I've seen guys take those and take them apart and use just the fan part, no oscillation. But I'm thinking, why couldn't you put a fan on that and let it oscillate? A filter. That would be an interesting way of doing it. So, but having that set in the area where you're working close to you, the better off you are, and it does keep the room even cleaner than a full-time air scrubber that you might put in the central location and let it run constantly. That is a good thing to do, but that is not enough. No matter what anybody tells you, that's not enough. So make yourself, making a mobile AFU is a good idea in my opinion. And like I said, I've shown you 6 different ways that it can be done. You can check out the other videos if you want to see the detail how I did it with that particular type of fan. But the basic theory is the same. The only thing to keep in mind is that when you're using a double filter, a pre-filter and a filter, if you're sucking through the filter, then through the fan, you want to pre-filter away on the opposite side of the fan so that it collects dust first. But if you put that in front of the fan to where the air is going through the fan then blowing into the filter, a pre-filter really isn't going to help you a whole lot, period, quite frankly. So you can just go ahead and not worry about that if you want. It helps a little, but nothing like it does from the other direction. So when that air is forced into that filter, you're just going to have to let it blow into that filter and then change the filter a little more often. No big deal. So that's the only thing to keep in mind about filtration. Keep in mind that if you've got an air filter in one little area in your central location and you turn the fan on over in there that's blowing across to hit you because you're standing someplace also, it's going to disrupt the air currents in here, and the dust that's in here is probably going to take longer to finally find its way to that central air conditioner or that central AFU, because of the fan causing air currents to go in all different directions in here. So remember, there are air currents. You do want to get your mobile units as close to where those are really being created to try to get as much as you can before it gets into the full atmosphere of the shop where it's just going to float around for a long time. So the only way that dust ever really settles is when it finds a home, like through a filter, or eventually maybe on a top shelf or up your nose. So wherever it's going to find, because otherwise it pretty much will float all day long. So when you go in at night, there's no air movement in here. Then when you come in the morning, the air is always a little bit cleaner. There's no dust running around because there's no air currents to keep it floating. So keep that in mind, that the air currents make a difference, but they exist in your shop, and that makes that air with the dust in it move all over your shop for hours at a time. So anyway, I hope this helps. If you have any question about a particular type of mobile AFU, let me know. If I can help you, I'll be more than happy to. But you really should have at least one mobile AFU as well as a stationary one. And they're very handy to have. They're easy and cheap to make. You can make them for under $30. You can make one for under $20 if you want to. So if you just have to look around. So they're very inexpensive to make and to maintain. The simpler you make it, the better off you'll be on a mobile unit. So keep that in mind. I'd love to see your ideas. And if you send me your pictures of those when you make them, I really enjoy watching that stuff. So don't be afraid to do that. So I hope you liked this video. Didn't ramble too much. Next time we're going to talk about Missy a little bit. I just had a funny story where something got caught on her mouth, on her jaw, and we couldn't get it off. Oh, she was in a panic. Anyway, it's a funny story. I'll tell you about that the next time. She's all right. No damage done. But it was really almost humorous now that you look back. At the time, it's kind of a real stressful moment. So anyway, I do want to thank you for coming by. If you learned something here, or you like this video, hit that like button. Lets me know I'm doing something right. I'll try to do my videos a little more often. I have been slacking off on that, but I still like to make them. I haven't stopped making them, so be patient with me. Eventually, I should get back up to full speed. Apparently, I'm not yet. So, but again, I do appreciate you coming by, and if you stayed this long, I'm really impressed. So, but remember, most importantly, come back again because I am nowhere near done. Thanks. We'll see all you guys soon.